Hello everybody, welcome back to Off Meta Musings. I'm your host Itan, and today we're going to be talking about the Royal Beastflayers. Nightmare Quest is now with us. We've got all the rules for the Royal Beastflayers and the Stormcast Eternals. I'm going to start with the Royal Beastflayers today. I think they're a really interesting faction. We're going to go over all of the fighters, we're going to go over all the abilities. We are going to take a look at some different builds that we can do. And yeah, I think it's a really fun warband, and I hope you will as well. So without further ado, let's get going. Starting with the reaction, we've got Tenacious Hunters, and it reads here, after a visible enemy fighter within 1 inch of this fighter makes a disengage action, allocate D3 damage points to that fighter. The initial comparison I want to make is with the generic reaction Strike Them Down. And Strike Them Down is when a visible enemy fighter within 1 inch makes a disengage action, but before that fighter moves away, you roll a dice. On a 4 or more, you allocate D6 damage points to that enemy fighter. I think Tenacious Hunters is better because it's not a 50% chance to do D6 damage points, it's just a flat D3. But from my games, I don't really have all that much of an opportunity to use Strike Them Down. I mean, either the thing I'm charging in is dead, or I'm charging in there specifically to pin things down, or maybe they're going to kill me, that kind of thing. And counter always seems to be a better reaction to use in these situations where either you know you're going to die, or you want to do other things. So yeah, I don't know how much of a use out of Tenacious Hunters that we can actually get, but that being said, the ghouls do have a bunch of abilities later on, which we're going to see, that does allow them to get some extra damage in combat. So maybe that's something. Maybe you can run in, you can use a bunch of abilities, do some minor damage, try to tie up your opponents, and then have them run away. And do a bunch of damage with Tenacious Hunters. But my initial thinking is that it's not all that good. I mean, not that it's not all that good, that it's not all that consistent as an ability that you want to use and as a reaction that you would want to build around. Going into the fighters themselves, we have the Royal Flaymaster. The Royal Flaymaster, we can see here, 175 points, so it's not on the expensive scale, but it's not amazingly cheap either. It's got a 2-inch range, which is nice, 3 attack, strength 4, 3, 5, so it's got a solid damage profile, I feel there. Movement 5 is something, it's something that we're going to see throughout all of the ghouls. They're all fairly high movement, so it's pretty nice to have a high movement warband again after the Hunters of Huanchi. It has toughness 4, and it's got 20 wounds, which is very average for this kind of leader fighter for a bespoke warband. One thing I do want to talk about down here, we've got the points per wound stat, and effectively that is the damage per attack calculated on a weighted damage average, assuming 25% of fighters that you're going to be facing are going to be toughness 3, 50% are going to be toughness 4, and the rest of it going to be toughness 5 or more. To give an idea, we've got Graveguard, who are sitting in at a points per wound of 12.7 as the most efficient unit in the game. Storm Fiends are sitting around 20, and the Skaven Death Martyrs sitting around about 25. Anything less than 25 puts the fighter in the top 30% of all fighters in the game in terms of damage efficiency, and they're considered to be very efficient in terms of damage output versus the points that you're investing. Now, the Royal Flaymaster has a bunch of abilities here. You've got the faction double, which is going to be Feed the Hounds, that anyone within this warband can use. And that reads, a fighter can only use this ability if an enemy fighter was taken down by an action made by them this activation. Remove a number of damage points from each other friendly fighter within 3 inches of this fighter up to the value of the ability. So it's a minor heal. I think out of everybody in this warband, the Flaymaster is probably in the best position to use the ability, considering its 3-5 damage profile. But overall, the question is going to be, are you going to waste a double on this, or use a double on this rather, when you can use a double to get bonus attacks in and really make sure that you're going to kill the thing it is that you're fighting? And I think overall Onslaught is going to win out, unless the thing that you're fighting is extremely weak and has been wounded already. In which case, yeah, maybe you want to use your Feed the Hounds just to get a small heal in. It's triple, which is something that I find very interesting. We're looking at pack tactics. So you pick an enemy fighter that's visible to this fighter, allocate a number of damage points to the enemy fighter equal to twice the number of friendly fighters within 3 inches of the enemy fighter. I feel like pack tactics is going to be one of those abilities that you are going to build around. We're going to see later that the ghouls themselves aren't all that expensive. So you have the opportunity to do a real swarm warband with the ghouls, run in maybe 3 ghouls or even 4 ghouls onto a big target, pop pack tactics on your Royal Flaymaster, and then do up to 8 damage if you have those 4 ghouls there. So I think that could be that could be something that's really strong because it works on any friendly fighter that's visible to the fighter. It gives the Flaymaster the ability to be allied in to other death factions. I think warbands like Soulblight Gravelords, where they can take up to 15 skeletons, for example, for really not all that many points, could benefit from a Flaymaster just to get that additional damage off. There's a question around how much damage is worth the triple that you're putting on, but I think that if you can get 4 or 6 damage out of this, it'll be well worth it. And finally, we've got their quad, no rest until our quest is done. So until the end of the battle round, you add +2 strength characteristic of melee attack actions made by visible friendly fighters while they are within 6 of this fighter. So it's a flat strength buff for a quad. The question is this going to be better than Rampage? I don't think in the majority of situations that it will be better than Rampage. Sure, ghouls are sitting around with fairly low strength. He does not boost himself because it specifies visible friendly fighters, so it's not even like he can use it to boost himself to strength 6 if he needs to take down something big. And yeah, I think just a flat Rampage would overall be better out for the Flaymaster in this case. Now, I think overall the Flaymaster is okay compared to other 175-point heroes. It trades in 1 attack for the movement 5 versus the common movement 4. The closest analogy I would probably say is the Witherlord, who has the exact same stats except for the movement and an attack. So that's really what he's traded in. But the Flaymaster doesn't have any notable buff or damage spike abilities aside from pack tactics and the quad that you'll really never likely use. I kind of almost wished that they would have made it 200 points and given it that extra attack that it really wants, because 3 attacks is not great even though it's got that 2-inch range, especially considering that the Flaymaster is going to be one of your main damage dealers in the warband. What you're going to see across the warband is a distinct lack of damage boosting abilities, which we've commonly seen in the other new warbands, starting with the Heart of Gur. So on the one hand, that does make things a little bit easier to evaluate because we don't have additional doubles or triples boosting the attack damage of different fighters. But on the other hand, it really just makes you look at the fighters themselves and evaluate them on their own merits and on the stats that they bring to the table. So that's just something that I wanted to mention there. Going into the Beastflayer Baron, I really like the Baron. He's 115 points. He's got 3 attacks at strength 4, 2, 4, so very much an average damage profile. Again, movement 5, toughness 4, 16 wounds, which is pretty nice for someone at or around the 100-point mark. He has, of course, the Feed the Hounds double, and we've got his own double. We've got Sound the Hunt. So pick a friendly number of visible fighters equal to half the value of this ability, rounding up, within 3 inches of this fighter, and those fighters can make a bonus move action of a number of inches equal to the value of this ability. EPA weighted average damage of 4.0, points per wound of 28.75. So not exactly inefficient, but not the best fighter overall. I think this is probably the fighter that you would want to build around if you were taking Beastflayers as your main faction. I think he combos well with other more fighty death heroes, so if you were to ally in something like the Askagan Exemplar to get more damage in, he can use his Sound the Hunt. It works on any friendly fighter, which is very good. You can use that double to get the extra movement in there and place your fighters much closer to where they want to be. Maybe you also want to ally in an Abhorrent Arc Regent for, again, a movement buff on that side. So you'll be able to stack your buffs. The Arc Regent's movement buff is on a triple. The Baron's is on a double. So it's more than possible that you'll be able to play both and use both abilities in one turn. And you can also do things like ally in something like a Direwolf, take that as a thrall, use the speed boosts from your Baron, maybe your allied Arc Regent also, and really get those fast fighters that you have onto objectives very quickly. I think that's going to be a common theme that we're going to see because everything is movement 5. I think that this warband is going to play the objective game very well. You're going to see slightly lacking on the damage side of things with this warband. It is a larger warband, so we can't expect it to do everything, but the inclusion of the Baron really does allow you to take key allies and get them where they need to be in order to bring their force to bear. Next up, we've got the Ghoul Squire. As far as I know, you get 3 of these in the box. They are 95 points apiece, so we are approaching mid-range status here. 4 attacks at strength 3, 2, 3, movement 5 again, toughness 4, which is nice, and 12 wounds. They have a triple of their own, Unleash the Hounds. Until the end of the battle round, add half of the value of this ability rounding up to the movement characteristic of friendly fighters with the Royal Beastflayers rune mark when they make a move action starting within 3 inches of this fighter. So again, we were talking about the Baron with its movement buffs. The Gore Squire can double down on that. It's a triple, so it works very well with the Baron's double, and really just allows your ghouls to get wherever you need them across the board. Its damage isn't fantastic because it's only got that strength 3. We're looking at a weighted damage of 3.67 and points per wound of 25.91. So it's still actually fairly efficient, just nothing like as efficient as something like Jade Obelisk Desecrator, for example. It doesn't have that raw damage. I do think that 95 points is actually a decent price point for the ghouls with their toughness 4 and 12 wounds. So they are actually quite comparable to something like a Bestigor or the 95 point Despoilers from the Jade Obelisk. Strength 3, as I've said, is the biggest weakness of this fighter due to the prevalence of toughness 4 in the game. And yes, they do have the movement triple, but I think it's more of a side grade than an upgrade from the Baron's double. So if you had the ability to take multiple of these, you would probably want to take multiple Barons instead. Overall, in the warband, as much as I do like these miniatures, I think they're fantastic. I think that the squires might be the weak link, just due to that strength 3. I think it depends if your local meta has a lot of toughness 3 fighters, as opposed to toughness 4 fighters. Suddenly their stock goes up quite a bit. But that being said, the toughness 4, 12 wounds, and movement 5 are overall pretty tasty stats for the 95 points that you're paying. Moving into the Offalhound, the undead baboons, as they are. 130 points, so not expensive, but not amazingly cheap either. 3 attacks at strength 424, so very much an average damage profile. It's the same profile as the Baron that we saw earlier. For those extra 15 points, what you're getting is 2 extra points worth of movement, a couple of wounds, and a downgrade from toughness 4 to toughness 3. They do have a double clambering horrors, so it's just like a lot of other doubles that we've seen that allows you to ignore the vertical distance of movement when you're climbing, so that's useful for something like this. 4.0 average damage, which is not terrible, but it's not amazing either. Points per wound of 32.5. I really wanted to like the Offalhounds, but for me, they don't seem to bring anything to the table that you can't already find elsewhere. If we are talking about running multiple boxes of the Beastflayers, you would really just not bother with the Offalhounds and take multiple Barons, because for a double, you can get up to this easily get up to the movement 7 that the Offalhound is using with exactly the same damage profile. You're only losing a couple of wounds, but I think in the toughness 4 that you're gaining from the Baron, it really makes up for that, and it kind of covers those couple of extra wounds that you're not using. The Beast Rune mark, as always, is a bit of a liability because your Offalhounds can't pick up treasure, but I think if you are just running 1 box, or maybe you're running 2 box, you kind of want to run your Offalhounds. I think you will either be running Offalhounds or your Ghoul Squires, depending on what it is that you're fighting into. One of them with the strength 3, but with more attacks, and one of them with the strength 4, but with less attacks. Finally, we've got our Ghoul Trackers. Ghoul Trackers are 55 points, so very cheap. 3-3-1-3 damage profile, very common for most chaff units. Movement 5, just like the rest of the warband. Toughness 3, pretty average for a ghoul. 8 wounds. You're not bringing them for really anything else apart from them being very cheap chaff. 55 points at movement 5, I think that's pretty good, especially for objective missions. The Ghoul Tracker is really what combos well with the pack tactics on your Flaymaster, so you can bring a lot of trackers for not all that many points, run them into things, even if your opponent doesn't manage to kill them, or they don't manage to kill your opponent, you can then activate your Flaymaster a little bit later, go pack tactics, do a bunch of spike damage, and then go fishing for crits with your trackers to kind of finish off whatever it is that you're fighting. Moving into allies, I've got a selection here that I think could work pretty well for this warband. We've got the Craven Huntmaster out of Nighthaunt, 135 points, so it's not the cheapest version of Resurrection that you can get, but I think it's the most versatile at the price point that you're paying. It does have those couple of ranged attacks, so maybe you want to shoot someone off of platforms, it's pretty useful for that. It's got 15 wounds, so it's fairly tanky, movement 6 and fly, so it can keep up with the rest of the warband. Like I said, it does have Resurrection, so it will enable you to bring guides back, which is the main difference between this warband and something like Soulbite Gravelords, who have Resurrection built into their fighters. We also have the Askagan Exemplar. I did mention that the warband was slightly light on damage. Outside of the Flaymaster, it doesn't have any real heavy hitters. So I think bringing something like an Exemplar could be very useful. It's only 205 points, but that 3646 damage profile is huge. It will run into a thing and it will do at least 8 damage to it because it's going to be hitting on 3s. So on average, 2 of those attacks are going to hit. I think it combos very well with the Baron, because you can use the Baron, get that extra move in there, then use the Exemplar's move of 5, which is not terrible either, to get into combat, and then go swinging. And finally, we've got the Abhorrent Arc Regent here. Again, 205 points, just like the Exemplar. A little bit more tanky than the Exemplar, but otherwise very similar. 4435 damage profile, which is, again, very good. The Arc Regent comes with a movement buff built in. So if you didn't want to take your Ghoul Squires over something a bit more fighty, you could take the Arc Regent and still have the benefit from your movement buff and the movement buff from your Baron. Just as a list here that I put together, I call it the Chosen Slingshot. The idea is that we are going to use the Chosen of the King combo. This isn't the cheapest way you can do it. For Chosen of the King to work, you're going to need a Crypt Haunter because you need that rune mark, and you're going to need another Flesh Eater Quartz hero with the Berserker rune mark in range. And once you do that, your Crypt Haunter is going to get +2 attacks until the end of the round. So that will push the Haunter up to 6 attacks at strength 4, doing 2/5 damage, which is fairly huge. If he gets to attack twice, he's going to be swinging with those 12 attacks, and he will mince through basically anything that he touches. He's very tanky at 32 wounds with that toughness 4. He's very fast with that 6-inch move, so he can definitely keep up with your warband. And again, you've got the Arc Regent itself with his inbuilt movement buff and his damage. Then the idea is that you put these two in a deployment group along with your Baron. The Baron uses his double and then propels these two forwards into your opponent, and it really provides a big look at me, you've got to deal with me now block that will just start mincing through your opponent's chaff units and their elite units. So the warband itself, we're looking at a Flaymaster as your hero because you have to take it, and kind of as a tertiary damage dealer. You've got your Baron, which everything kind of hinges around. You've got your Crypt Haunter, your Abhorrent Arc Regent, 5 Ghoul Trackers. I did mention that this isn't the cheapest way that you could do it. You could take the slightly smaller version of the Arc Regent. I think he is 15 or 20 points cheaper, and if you wanted, you could upgrade one of your Ghoul Trackers to a Direwolf to give you a little bit of extra speed. Direwolves are better than your normal ghouls, but I think the damage that you make up for in the Abhorrent Arc Regent really counters that. Similar things that you can do, you could ally in a pair of Askagan Exemplars, like I talked about already, and you can do the same thing. You could use the Baron, have them in the same deployment group, and just shoot them at your opponents. A pair of Exemplars still doesn't give you enough points to get that 10th member into the warband. It's something that I would really try and do, but the points just don't add up. But at least with 9 fighters, you still have enough fighters to work with your Flaymaster's pack tactics, and there's always the ability to go, okay, I've activated my Baron, got my 3 moves off, run my Haunter and my Arc Regent in, and then activate your Flaymaster to do another 4 damage if you've got the extra triple to whatever it is that they're fighting, to make sure that either they don't have to waste attacks on killing things that they might not have just killed, or to kill something else. I think as a 1-box warband, I think they're okay. You've got the 2 Offalhounds and the 3 Squires. I think they'll really come into their own if you get a second box, because that allows you to run 2 Barons and then choose between the Squires and the Offalhounds while still keeping your numbers up with your Ghoul Trackers. And it'll allow you to run a second Flaymaster just as a bit more damage and a bit more damaging punch. I think overall, as a warband, I really like them. I think they're going to be very good on objective missions, of course, just simply because they've got all of that maneuverability. They have a lot of free moves, and they've got that base move of 5, which I think is pretty valuable, especially in something like the Rumble Pack, where you want to go places and you want to capture things. I think as a 9-man warband, if you're getting a lot of additional damage in there, that's absolutely fine. But if you don't have the additional damage from your Haunter, your Arc Regent, or maybe Exemplars, or whatever it is you decide to put in, you want to go much bigger and really double down on those ghouls and really double down on pack tactics and using the Baron to get places. There's always the possibility of running a Terrorgeist because you have those 55-point chaff. but with the points updates at the beginning of the year, I don't think that's nearly as powerful as running something like a combo like this. That's it from me for today. That was the Royal Beastflayers. It was fairly simple, to be honest. Because they don't have a lot of damage boosting or attack boosting abilities, it's fairly easy to evaluate the fighters on their own merit, and I do think that as a maneuverability warband, they're going to be fairly interesting to play, and I think they're going to be pretty fun. I plan on picking up a box of them to see what I can do there. But yeah, that's it. That's it from me for today. If you like what you saw and you want more stuff like this, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about the Royal Beastflayers, if there are any builds that you want to bring, if there are any interesting combos that you think might work, either with the Baron or putting the Flaymaster into other warbands that might work, and we can have a good conversation about it. But yeah, that's it. That's it from me, and I will see you next time.